So once again, thank you all for joining us this evening. My name is Vineet Chander. I direct Princeton University's Hindu Life program and serve as the Hindu chaplain on campus. This evening, we're so happy to have with us Gaurav Rastogi, who will speak to us about Karma Yoga, the path of action. Gaurav doesn't just speak about Karma Yoga, he in fact models it. As an entrepreneur with 20 plus years of executive experience, he has led executive roles at large companies and has also founded and sold an AI startup. As a board mentor, Gaurav works closely with business leaders that are driving business reinvention and sales transformation. Gaurav holds an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad, which is India's #1 program, and a mechanical engineering undergrad degree from Delhi Technological University. He is the author of 3 business books and several podcast episodes on the future of work. Apropos of this evening's lecture, his forthcoming book, which will be published by Oxford University Press later this year, discusses the relevance of Karma Yoga in the age of destruction and distraction. Gaurav is a dhyana meditation and yoga teacher with RYT 500 and 200-hour credentials, and has been teaching for more than 10 years in the Silicon Valley area. He has founded 2 learning nonprofit organizations and is frequently invited to speak at events and conferences on the practices and philosophy of yoga and Hinduism more broadly. Gaurav teaches the yoga of living deeply, an authentic yoga system designed for the modern world. At the Living Deeply Foundation, which he helped to found, he has developed practical study guides based on the Bhagavad Gita and Vedanta and yoga philosophy, bringing this ancient wisdom into practical and contemporary language. He is also a board member and dean at Hindu Community Institute, which has a unique program to teach and practice Karma Yoga. He loves to teach, write, and create wonderful things that make the world a better place. He lives in the San Francisco Bay Area with his family, and we are just so honored and delighted to have him with us. Let's please give Gaurav Rastogi a very warm Princeton University Hindu Life program welcome.
Namaskar, Vineetji. Thank you very much, and welcome to all the guests, all the audience that have joined us today. Are you able to hear me clearly? Yes?
Loud and clear.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'd like to begin with an invocation, so please join me by sitting comfortably in any posture. As long as you're sitting with your back straight, keep your back, neck, and head in a straight line. Close your eyes gently. Relax the expression on your face. Relax your shoulders. Relax your belly. Keep the attention in your belly for the next few breaths. Now bring your palms together in Namaskar Mudra at the heart center, pressing the palms together gently, touching the fingers together gently, and gently touching the back of your thumbs into your chest. Now, think of the highest divinity that's dearest to you and invite them to come sit in your heart and stay with you through this conversation that we're going to have, inviting them to stay in your heart. We're going to chant Om once and then I'll chant a shlok. Exhale completely, take a deep breath. Inhale. Now I'll chant. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat kripatamaham vande Paramananda Madhavam. Bring your hands down. You may open your eyes by blinking them. The shlok is a dhyana shloka, which is generally chanted before entering into a study of the Gita. And what it's saying is, I remember with devotion the divine grace of Krishna, who can make the dumb speak. Mukam karoti vachalam. The dumb, mute people can speak with eloquence, and the lame can cross high mountains. I remember and extol that grace that flows from this supreme bliss manifestation of Madhava. And with that invocation, we begin this talk. Um, I'm going to make this talk interactive, and my objective with this talk is to tell you a little bit more about Karma Yoga, but not just entertain you with this talk, but give you a few things to carry back, a few seeds that I'd like you to germinate in your mind, in your body, and those seeds may germinate over the next months, years, the rest of your life, and evolve into something new and interesting in the way of the karma yoga in your own body, in your own self. So I'll ask you to imagine a few things. If you have questions, you can type them into the chat window, and I'll be sure Vinitji and I will be sure to address those questions. I'm going to begin, of course, by talking to you about water, H2O. How is it that you can combine two things that you know really well and get something completely different? Hydrogen is not wet. In fact, it's gaseous at room temperature. And oxygen is also not wet and gaseous at room temperature. And yet, suddenly, when you combine them, it creates life giving water. It's a little like that with Karma Yoga. In popular imagination, especially in the West, everyone thinks they know the meaning of the word karma, which most people see this as a system of cause and effect where you do something and it comes back to bite you the next time around. And so that's the popular understanding of the word karma. It's not incorrect, it's not entirely true. So the word yoga, of course, is completely understood in the West as a system of postural practices. That's also not true. That's not the full truth. Karma yoga is not a term that's well understood by most people for reasons I'll come into in a few moments. Karma is actions, and yoga is the union of the lower self to the higher self. And so, karma yoga is the unification of the lower self to the higher self by means of action. Karma yoga is one of the three major yogas taught in the Bhagavad Gita, the other two being Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion, and Jnana Yoga, the path of wisdom and insight. Now, these three are usually taught by teachers. So, Bhakti Yoga, usually taught by people that are leading Bhakti Yoga schools, and they tend to emphasize the Bhakti Yoga school at the expense of everything else, which is in one way a correct interpretation. Vedanta people tend to emphasize the Jnana Yoga path, which is the path of discrimination and wisdom as a means of achieving unification with the divine. Not many people talk about Karma Yoga. And today I'd like to impress upon you that Karma Yoga is indeed the yoga for people like you and me, people who want to live and engage in this world and want to still experience that wonderful and beautiful unification with the divine. These paths are not separate paths, they are three interlinked paths in a braid. Progress in one path also gets you progress on the other paths. You may not think of it that way, that's all. The ideas in the Bhagavad Gita and the practices are interlinked. And today I'm going to tell you how they're interlinked in a way that you can practically apply to your own life and be able to take it back to your sphere and influence people around you with your service. Now, I'm going to today give you a few seeds, but before I give you those seeds, I'd like you to prepare the ground for to receive those seeds. So I'm going to ask you to imagine something, and then we'll see what to do about it. Now, this is new stuff. I'm going to try whiteboarding. And if it doesn't work, we'll use more of our imagination. If it does work, well, then you have a whiteboard to look at. Let's see if we can do that. Now, if you're seeing the whiteboard, you may, let me know, Vineet, if you're seeing a whiteboard. It should show up. If you stop spotlighting me, you'll be able to see the whiteboard. Great.
Yes, we
Now,
can
what
see
I'd
it.
like Okay, great. What I'd like you to imagine is, I'm sure you're familiar with the character of Ravana. This is a ten-headed person in the story of Ramayana. So imagine a person with 10 heads. I'm going to sketch those out with my green pen here. And of course, he has a twirly long mustache, very important for you to remember, and 10 heads. He has 10 heads because he's extremely intelligent and so on. So we're going to imagine having 10 heads. We'll deal with this later. Right now, just prepare the ground. Then he has his arms outstretched and his, pardon my sketching, his arms are outstretched, but they're in a fist. He does not seem to have any thumbs whatsoever. Just remember that. And in the place where the Iron Man heart reactor should be is a lead or iron ball, solid ball in the center of the chest. He's wearing pants, very important for him to wear pants. And his shoes happen to be sticking to the ground. So that's the image that you need to carry. This is a person with 10 heads, an iron heart, fists outstretched with no thumb, and shoes that are sticky. If you've got this so far, we will come back to this and do something with this image. Keep that image in your mind. I'm going to chant another shlok and bring us back into the context of Karma Yoga as described in Bhagavad Gita. Now, the Bhagavad Gita is placed in the Mahabharata, which is an epic tale of a large battle. And in this battle, the battle is about to begin. 4.5 million people are gathered around. The sides are not clean cut. There are friends and family on both sides. And the leading archer of one side with his chariot driver, who happens to be Sri Krishna, God Himself. And they're having this conversation, which is the Bhagavad Gita. And so this is a very dramatic scene, and it begins with this shlok. Dhritarashtra Uvacha. Dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta yutsavaha mamakah pandavaschaiva kimakurvata sanjaya. In the holy field of Kurukshetra, our armies gathered for battle. That's the first half. When you look at philosophy, in general, philosophy coming from the Hindu schools, they tend to be sanctuary philosophies. They're from the Upanishads, Vedanta. And Upanishads are private conversations between a sage and their followers that are prepared to receive this wisdom. They are now situated in a sanctuary, a forest, aranya, where they are away from the crowds, away from the hubbub of everyday commerce, in a secure place, and in a private conversation. Upanishad literally means to come sit near. This is not a public speech, this is a private conversation. And now the highest, the subtlest of truths may be revealed. And so the Upanishads begin with Athato Brahma Jignasa. And now, therefore, a curiosity about the true nature of reality. Jignasa is curiosity. So, in the usual schools of philosophy, you're in a secure place and you're curious. But now contrast that to the situation at the battlefield. It is possibly the most opposite you can think of. It is not in a secure place. If anything, 4.5 million people gathered for battle, 10 will survive. Everyone else dies. And so there's a lot at stake in this battle. It's about to begin. There is no peace to be found. There is chaos all around. A moment of silence before this chaos. And a philosophy is now being exchanged in a conversation between Sri Krishna and Arjuna. And so there is a difference in the nature of philosophy that is disclosed in a secure sanctuary versus in the field of battle. Now, Arjun, our protagonist, is his worlds are crumbling inside and out. Outside of him are his friends, his family, his relations, his teachers on the opposing side. And in order to win this battle, he is going to have to kill each one of them. On the inside, these choices and the complicated math of doing the right thing is weighing him down. He's confused, he's dejected, and he has, in fact, gone into a panic and he has decided he doesn't want to do this battle anymore. It's not worth it to him. Arjun is not the only one whose world is crumbling inside and out. You and I are precisely in the same position. Probably not as dramatic, but the world outside is changing in dramatic ways. Everything that I was taught at school way back and everything that I knew about the world is changing. The nature of economics is changing. The nature of government is changing. The nature of work is changing. The nature of our relationship with technology is changing. There is no safety in this chaos. The world outside is utterly in a state of confusion. And our minds are no better either. Our attention spans are short. Algorithms are working extra hard to make us hooked to our phones, our devices, our computer, our social media, and angry, outrage. They're outraging us against friends, neighbors, brothers, family. The world inside and the world outside are in the exact same type of situation as Arjun finds himself right now. And so the philosophy that Arjun finds very useful to declutter his mind, to come to a state where he is decisive, and that clarity and that energy flowing through him to do the right thing. The philosophy that worked for him is more likely to work for us, which is applying karma yoga in the context of the three yogas, as I'll explain. Now, here are a few starters that we need to understand before we get deep into karma yoga. Most people who know about karma yoga, of course, know that karma yoga, karmanye vadikaraste, which is you have right only to your action and not to the fruits thereof. Most people have this sense of knowledge about karma yoga, and they're right. But as they say in TV infomercials, but wait, there's more. And so, as you think about karma yoga, I'm going to help you just peel back a little bit more and see the vast web of philosophical and practical ideas that we can take back into our work. We are confused, distressed, dismayed, disconnected, and all of that, we can actually get over that and flow with this current of energy that brings peace with it, that brings joy with it, that brings satisfaction with it through the application of karma yoga in our lives. The next thing you need to understand is from a yoga perspective, what is our position in this world? Yoga, of course, as I said previously, is the union of the lower self to the higher self. What are these lower selves and higher selves? We believe we exist. This is me. This is my body. This is, my house, my computer, all sorts of things. That's the lower self. The higher self is the creative force and energy that this universe is made of, and that which animates everything. The world outside of our eyes appears to work on its own. Thank you very much. Seems to work independently. The energy that's flowing around the world outside is flowing on its own. And beneath our surface, just a quarter of an inch beneath the surface of our own self, the world inside, in terms of the physical body, the energy body, and even our mental states. The world inside seems to be working on its own dynamic. After all, we're not paying any attention to our digestion. Unless you're able to grow your hair at will, and you haven't told me we're not able to grow our hair at will or nails, the body runs itself. The breath runs itself, digestion runs itself. Our thoughts seem to come on their own volition either as well. In the middle of this world, outside and inside, is a marginal self, something that's sitting just at the border, a paper thin sense of self that our consciousness weaves and spins into this entire world. This is very important to understand from a point of view of yoga because everything flows from this understanding that the energy outside and the energy inside are largely autonomous, and we have very little way of directing them. You could hold your breath, but can you stop your digestion, for example? So, understanding that our position is a marginal sense of self at the border of the outside and the inside, just this thin layer of interaction is very important to understand. And the project of all the yogas, how do you achieve union with the divine? You remove the layer. You can remove the layer in three ways, and all three ways are equally and must be applied. One, by wisdom, by a series of logical deduction and inferences, you arrive at the conclusion that that which I call myself is really an illusory self. It doesn't, I can't really tell which part of me is me, truly. Everything seems to change. And I arrive at the conclusion that maybe it's just the energy of the universe flowing through me. That's Jnana Yoga. You may arrive at that by actual observation in a meditation process as well. Bhakti Yoga begins with that logic and says, of course, I am nothing in front of divinity. And in Bhakti Yoga, we choose our divinity that is dear to our heart and let our heart melt into the divine, the sense of self that sits here like that iron ball that we just imagined. It just melts away, and then our heart flows around. That's Bhakti Yoga, all the practices of Bhakti Yoga. And Karma Yoga is through our actions, letting the flow of the universe just flow unimpeded and no care for this imaginary self that we already concluded does not quite exist. There are no basis for this self. Those are the three yogas. So that's the second thing you need to know. The third fundamental thing that you need to know is that as a human social species, we have an innate desire to serve. I'm going to describe that with a little more detail so you understand. We are designed to be a social species. Our brain is designed to keep track of who groomed whom, who said what to whom, who screamed at whose children. In primates, we have seen that, and the same capacity has grown into us as humans. We are a social species designed for service. But similar to being able to walk because we have two legs, it doesn't follow that we're going to use that capacity. Someone needs to teach it to us. Someone needs to unlock that power to serve. And the corollary to that is if we do not know how to serve, if we do not express our internal desire to serve, we will lead unhappy, incomplete lives. And we will somehow feel unexpressed in our to the fullest degree. So this innate desire to serve, you should keep that in mind. Finally, karma yoga and all the yogas are a system for living in this world fully as if one is on the outside. And so it is not a way of disengaging. And a lot of people erroneously conclude that the process of yoga takes you away from the world and away from the interaction. Where is there anywhere to go? The object is not to give up your family, your wealth, or your work, or being passionate about your work, or any of that. Far from it. It is a way of engaging even more deeply with what you're doing in a way that allows you to be engaged. Now, here are a few things that I'd like you to take away, for karma, for to actually take these seeds of karma yoga back into your life. Now remember what we were imagining. 10 heads, a lead heart right over here, like Iron Man, but just a black ball of metal. And then arms stretched out with no thumbs, and feet that have shoes that are sticky. And just so you know, we're going to replace those shoes. We're going to buy you new shoes, Nike branded ones, and for reasons you're about to find out. So far, so good. Now let's go back to the whiteboard. Let me see if I'm able to whiteboard out. And I'm going to now start telling you a few stories. Okay, let me see if I can hold on. Let me see if I can actually share the image because we already had it. And we just talk around that image. How about that? All right. So if you are seeing the image again, remember this is what you're imagining. Keep this image vividly in your mind. This is a mnemonic device for you to fully embody the learnings and take them with you. And you can bring these back up almost instantaneously just by thinking about them. Now, what did we have? We had the 10 heads. The 10 heads represents the choices that we have, the the thoughts that are rolling through our head, that are just rolling through our head and confusing and confounding us. Our object, Arjun, for example, in the Bhagavad Gita, is confused by the maelstrom of thoughts that are swirling in his head, just confusing him and making him freeze, panic, and stop. Now, what you want to do is, let me see if I can mark this up. Hmm, cannot mark it up, can I? All right, let me. Okay, what you want to do is reduce these 10 heads down to just one. You want to be one pointed in your thoughts. Dhyana meditation, learning to meditate as a professional, as someone who's living in the world, is extremely important because it allows us to let our thoughts settle down, let our generation of new options and problems to solve, let that capacity settle down and see the world for what it truly is and not what these filters are telling us. So, these 10 heads, you want to be calm in the chaos, learn to meditate. Dhyana meditation is very important for that because a clear mind allows you to see clearly and perceive your actions far more clearly than when you're confused. Making choices is overrated. Overrated. So in Karma Yoga, you want to be in a choiceless state, which is you make choices, but you're not having to choose choices. You know what the choice is instinctively. So now those 10 heads have been reduced down to one single head. Now, let's bring ourselves down. So, and by the way, in the 10 heads, the other thing in the Gita is the web of choices is also linked to the web of hope. The word used in Sanskrit is Asha Pash. Asha Pash is the web of hope. Oh, if I do this, this will happen, and that might happen, and eventually something else will happen, and so on. This web of hope is distracting us from truly engaging with the work at hand, from being present to the task in the immediate moment. This web of hope is a delusional, it's poison coated with sugar. It feels nice, but it's useless. So the cutting of these 10 heads also allows us to just focus on the moment and the task at hand and let the web of hope sort itself out on its own. Now we're moving down to the heart. Now remember, this person, you in this imagination, had a lead heart. This is not poetic. You already know that if you have a heavy heart, it feels heavy. If you have a cold heart, dark heart, you know what those mean. You want a light heart. You want a glowing, illuminated heart. You want a clear, luminous heart filled with love and light. How are we going to do that? The practices of devotional service are very important. Chanting, prayers, doing your morning prayers, singing, bhajan and kirtan, and just remembering God and God's sweet presence in our heart by invoking that presence in our heart and replacing this hard metal ball with a luminous ball filled with the deity that we find the dearest, sitting on a lotus, just right here. Luminous light heart. This luminous heart is the source of these currents of experience, the emotional currents of joy, emotional currents of bliss, ananda, we call it. And so devotional practices are extremely important. And then when you work with, the phrase in the Gita is yogastha kuru karmani. Act in a state of yoga. This is union because now divinity sits in our heart, acts through our being, and stay in that state and then engage in the world. Is there a question? No question? I heard something. All right. The other concept here is simply that of surrendering the self, dovetailing our interest with the interests of the divine, and letting that light guide us. Now, there is some sound on this line, so I'm going to see if I can mute someone. Avineet, would you mind muting the line that is talking? Thank you. All right, back. Yeah, back to this. All right. So now the object of these devotional practices of removing that lead heart and filling it with this light, luminous heart filled with divinity, dovetailing your interest and cultivating shraddha, belief, unwavering, limitless shraddha, because this belief is what helps us move about this world and make decisions, make choices. We are taught to doubt, but you've already got rid of your 10 heads. Learn to believe, and not because you're credulous or because you're stupid, because only when you believe can you make things happen. More on that in some other talk. Finally, in the heart, you want to work with a lot of enthusiasm. That enthusiasm flows through the heart by definition. What do I mean? The word enthusiasm literally means to be filled with God. To be filled with God is to act in enthusiasm, which means your heart is filled with God and you're feeling this tingling spider sense of joy that's animating your being, and that energy you're putting out into the world, and everyone can feel it. They can feel your vibe and energy. That's in the heart. Let's move on to the third image that we had, which is hands stretched out. But look, Ma, no thumbs. Why no thumbs? It turns out the attention we're calling to is just the thumb. Why? Because, of course, I'd like you to rate this class 2 thumbs up, of course, but not just that. The thumbs represent skill, excellence, mastery. And in Karma Yoga, this is an essential practice. Because when you're not good at something, you're always conscious of it. But when you're at a level of mastery, everything flows through, and even you don't know what's going on. The phrase used in the Gita is yoga karmasu kaushalam. Yoga is skill at work. And the thumb, of course, is the opposable thumb. And from the story of Eklavya, you remember no thumb, no skill. So having your thumbs back is very important. But another thing that comes with this image is if you have the thumbs back, oh, it's all this guy, I did this, I made it happen. Don't do that. Keep your thumbs outstretched. Why? Because you didn't make it happen. Uh, Not enough time. But the feeling in Karma Yoga is always Naiva kinchid karomi, which is to say, I'm not doing anything, but things are being done through me. And that sense of non-doerness is a very important part of Karma Yoga, because then there is no ego formation. I didn't do it. I happened to be the body that was letting this happen. But the great things, you remember the shloka I chanted at the beginning of this verse, beginning of this talk, mukam karoti vachalam. Even the mute can speak if the power of God flows through them. And so greatness can be achieved by mere humans like you and I, if only we get our individual self out of the way. So keep your thumbs pointing away from you, just pointing up and rating this class 2 thumbs up. But the important thing here is to also know your own dharma. Those four fingers pointing back to you. Swadharma is very important. If you're right-handed, you can't really work with the left hand. If you're left-handed, you can't really work with the right hand. Don't pretend to be that which you're not. Understand your true nature, because only then will your energy flow in the most optimal manner. Know your inner nature and express your inner nature in the optimal manner. All right, we got three things covered. The 10 heads are down to a single head. The heart is now light and luminous, and the hands have the thumbs up. We're very skilled. Let's go all the way down to the shoes. Remember what's going on with the shoes? Your feet, yeah, your shoes are stuck to the ground. What does that mean? What we're talking about is simply this stickiness. I like doing this. This is for me. This is what I want. This is not going to be good. That is not going to be good. Sticking to action or inaction. Limpanti is the word used in Sanskrit. Also, sangam tyakta kuru karmani. Leave all the stickiness and then act. So you're all the stickiness that you have. Oh, I like this, I like that. You're wasting energy. If your intuition has already determined what you need to do, then just put on your Nike shoes and just do it. I'm going to stop sharing. Good, you're looking at me. So we've got the whole image worked out, and we have rewired this image. Through the process of learning to meditate, dhyana, we're now calm in the chaos by letting our heart fill with the nectar of divinity. We are now filled with love, filled with connection, filled with the ability to have and inspire belief in others. We are skilled, and that skill and excellence allows us to be in a flow state. And our shoes have changed, and we're now just doing it. We are no longer confusing ourselves, oh, this or that. None of that bureaucratic nonsense. And in that, I've come to the end of this exposition of Karma Yoga. I hope these seeds of Karma Yoga you're able to take back into your life. Remember this weird but fantastic image and take it with you. And whenever you need to remember this conversation, it'll come right back up. With that, I'm done with this talk, and I'm really looking forward to question and answers from you. Vineet?
Thanks so much, Gaurav, for that wonderful talk and very vivid image. We want to continue to invite folks to send questions to me into the chat box, and I'll relay them to Gaurav. So, Gaurav, the first question that came through is that what you're describing seems to be a synthesis of karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga rather than karma yoga itself. So are you suggesting that karma yoga is a synthesis, or are you suggesting that we need to intentionally synthesize these three aspects?
I'm suggesting that synthesis is, in fact, the only way to understand these yogas. You don't, there are no schools, it's not physics and biology and chemistry, and you do three things separately. They're mutually interlinked and interrelated. And progress in one also brings you progress in the other. For example, Bhakti Yoga schools routinely, Bhakti Yoga is the highest of the yogas because the last step is also the first step, which is the dropping, the surrendering of the ego and the self. And so, Bhakti Yoga, if you have already surrendered the self, then naturally all your actions are for the divine. All your action is Karma Yoga if you have achieved that stage of Bhakti. And it's the same with Jnana Yoga. Once you understand truly, once you have that Vivek, Vairagya will automatically come as a, once you have the discrimination, then the dispassion will result automatically. And then your question is, all right, what am I to do? What I am to do now is to let the action flow through. So you see, the conclusion of all these yogas is always the same. Think of it as a braid. Now, Swami, so Ramakrishna Paramahans, he used to call this a kheer. A kheer is a combination of rice, sugar, and milk. And the kheer is special because of this unique combination. The robustness of Karma Yoga, the rice of Karma Yoga, the clarity of milk of Jnana Yoga, and the sweetness of Bhakti Yoga. And so they are always intertwined. That's the conventional understanding. Taking each individual thread and parsing it out is a good way to understand the individual standalone thread, but understand that they work together as a braid. And you've merely pulled out a thread in order to understand it fully.
Oh, can I just ask, what was the rice?
The rice, so the rice is karma yoga, which is the robustness of karma yoga action. The milk, and so milk and water is always an analogy or metaphor used in the Hindu tradition, where milk is truth and water is not, and a sage knows how to separate milk from water. Nirkshira viveka, it's called. So water and milk can be separated by Paramahansa. So that's so milk is in this case a metaphor for wisdom or insight. And of course, bhakti yoga is sweetness, because of course that's what sweetness is about.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. What a lovely analogy. We've got a number of questions coming in, so I'm going to try my best to combine some of them. So combining a couple of questions, um, when it comes to karma yoga, when it comes to action, does it matter more what we do, or does it matter more how we do it? Is the emphasis on the action, on the consciousness in which we perform the action, both, neither?
So it's a both and I think so. It also neither and kind of things. Let me explain. Um, once you've surrendered once we've surrendered our individual will to the will of the Supreme, then the actions that will be executed by this physical body will automatically be in consonance with in concordance with divine intention. That's one. And so the things that we will take up will naturally be the things that need to be done. Now, you might say Arjun's job is to go out and kill. How can that be divine will, right? That sounds like something he would do for selfish reasons. It turns out, if you understand the Mahabharata and the Gita quite carefully, in fact, it is quite the opposite. He is choosing to sit out from the battle for personal reasons, because what's the point? I like this guy, he's my relative, he's my teacher. What's the use of all this? It's for personal reasons he's staying out, because his internal swadharma, his own internal intention is he's a warrior, and they have exhausted every other reason, every other way of finding a truce. And this is a battle for dharma, which is the restoration of the order within society. And for those reasons, even picking up his arms and killing people is part of his dharma. Elsewhere, in again, we may not have enough time today, but elsewhere later, this is a few days later, the Gita is over, the battle's already begun, and Sri Krishna and Arjun again have a conversation, because he's having another one of those moments where he is angry about something. Arjun is. And Krishna then sits him down and explains to him that dharma cannot be in coming from a rule book. And he tells two stories. We don't have time today, but dharma cannot come from a rule book, because the space, the time, the context is always changing. And it's very subtle. And he gives the example of that and says dharma is that which holds society together. Dharyate iti dharma. And so, knowing what to do, to answer your question finally, knowing will also, that wisdom will also come when we're in a state of karma yoga. And then whatever we do, so what we do and how we do it will both flow from karma yoga.
Thank you. There are some questions around when we were speaking, Gaurav, about adding the thumbs to the outstretched fists, and the need to develop skills and develop even mastery. Some questions arise from how we understand the role of ego in that, and how can we develop that kind of mastery without falling into the trap of ego, of comparison, of competition, of predicating my success on the failure of others?
Yeah, that's a great, fantastic question, because it's so subtle. And that's why the thumbs are not pointing to the big man himself, because you're not developing ego. Why? How do you know that? Because you're indifferent to success or failure. You just want to perform the action in the most excellent way possible. That excellence itself brings with it satisfaction. Failure and success are just results of many things acting at once. My action is only one part of the overall equation of this universe. So I may perform excellently, but factors may not be in my favor. And if my ego is developing, I will take it personally. Oh, how did I fail? But if you've developed excellence, you revel in the doing of the thing, and success, siddha siddhayo samobhutva, which is success, failure, it's all the same, right? And I'll give you an example in modern life. A lot of people who are now trillionaires, you know who you are, uh, trillionaires, they've got there by failing repeatedly and not taking that failure personally. They said, look, I failed at a $10 million bet, I failed at $1 billion bet, I'm going to maybe fail at $100 billion bet, but that failure is necessary to get to the path of wherever I want to do, whatever impact I want to have on society. And so, if you're taking it personally, that failure will cause you to lose a lot of energy in moping, in feeling bad, in trying to correct that thing. But if you just say, look, I'm in charge of my process, I'm in charge of my mastery of my actions, and the results are not on me. And frankly, it's okay with me if it's successful or not successful. If people are nice to me or they're not nice to me, it doesn't matter. I'll just keep rolling. Because again, I put on my Nike shoes, I'm not sticking to anything anymore. I'll just do it.
How do we square away that sense of what sounds like not really caring about success or failure? How do we square that with, particularly if our actions are related to helping and serving others? How do we square that with a desire to genuinely affect change and to help people? How can I not care about the results if people's lives, livelihoods, the state of the planet are dependent, in one sense, on the outcome?
This is again a very a fantastic question, because this is a very subtle nuance that people often miss. The call of karma yoga is not to be dispassionate and not engaged or not care about things. Far from it. And again, the internet is a great source of wisdom. And out on the internet, I found this quote. Somebody had written this, which it really stuck with me, which is, care enough to not care. What does that mean? If you care enough about the game, you're not going to be looking at the scoreboard. You're going to look at the next delivery and taking care of that ball, baseball, cricket metaphor. But again, if you're only looking at the scoreboard or how much money you're making from that whole thing, you're not going to be in the game. So if you truly care about the game, you're not going to care about the immediate score at that particular point, because you want to play the game with full mastery, with full attention, full presence. So when it comes to doing things for other people, do you care about succeeding or failing? You do care about succeeding or failing. You just don't take it personally. And you use that failure to inform you about how to acquire more mastery, new skills. If you don't fail, you don't learn. You don't learn, you fail. So you acquire new mastery. Just don't take it personally. Is all. You have to care, of course. Passion is very important, and nowhere in the Gita, nowhere elsewhere does it say you have to be dispassionate, because a dispassionate, apathetic person is probably crueler than someone who's fully engaged.
I want to switch gears a little bit, and we have a question. You spoke earlier, Gaurav, about um, the kind of choice being overrated, I think is how you put it, and being in this kind of choiceless state. So we have a really insightful question that asks, how does finding clarity to the point of being in a choiceless state fit together with situations where we may not be fully informed, for very good reasons, we may need to spend considerable time deliberating to arrive at an informed conclusion? Shouldn't we embrace in those situations the notion of informing ourselves, and then from that place of being informed, making wise choices?
Yes, fantastic question. You want to use all the executive function of the brain to compute, for sure, gather all the data, gather all the inputs. But the problem with staying in the head, with your 10 heads that you're doing 10 times computation in, is that the computation leads to analysis paralysis. and and what happens is we're now thinking, well, I don't have enough data. If only I had more data, I'd be able to make a decision, an informed choice. But the fact is that not having enough data is often an excuse for inaction. The fact also is you never have enough data about anything. And the fact is, you already know the right thing to do. You're just not paying attention to, in quotes, the still small voice that that bubbles up from the heart and goes to the head. In terms of Star Wars metaphor, this is Yoda telling young Luke, "Do or do not. There is no try. If you're trying to do it, you're trying to fail. Just do it or don't do it. But don't sit there and waffle," which is what most of us do because we're trying to gather data.
Yeah, I think that's such an insightful and powerful observation. I was just speaking with a friend earlier today about how data driven we are collectively and individually. And it's while we gain so much and there's so many wonderful contributions that our kind of hyper data driven society has given us, there is also this darker side where, as you said, we can become so dependent on data that we can feel like, well, I'll only act when I have enough data, and we end up in that space of, as you said, analysis paralysis. So thank you for that reminder. We've got just a little bit of time left, and so perhaps just a couple of final questions. One asks, and I'm going to combine a couple here. You mentioned in the image or the analogy about the need to replace the lead heart with a light with a heart of luminosity and of softness.
Yes.
And so there's some questions around that and some other aspects of karma yoga, perhaps, that are asking, in effect, does that happen organically? Does it happen naturally? Is that a matter of effort? Is that a matter of grace? Both, neither?
Yeah, so Prasad, so it is a matter of grace, divine grace, which is flowing through, but it doesn't mean that we don't have to act in order to attain that divine grace. It does flow on its own. So, in casual terms, we would say our action leads to the situation where divine grace might flow. And let me explain the lead heart a little bit more. Most of us live in our heads because we've got used to thinking and you sort of cogitating. But the emotional seat is the heart. The emotional sense of source of the self is the heart. And you already know this from poetry and popular language. When you have a heavy heart, it's not in your head. Your heart literally feels heavy. And when you cry, when you had a good crying session, your heart says, my heart has lightened. What's happening is, I like to think, this is not, I didn't read this from a book and I'm not a dentist, but I'll still give you this example. You know how plaque forms around the gums? Think of it as plaque forming around the psychic heart. Why? What is this plaque? It's me, and mine. And I'm trying to protect myself, shield myself from the world around us. And this plaque, over years of habituation, is just a hard heart. It's just me and my stuff and what I want and my things. And that feels heavy, it drags us down. And when do we feel lighter? When we're with friends, when we're in good company, when we're in the company of a sage. Our heart suddenly begins to flow and we notice it. When we're in a maybe in a church, temple, mosque, whatever, some sort of a situation where you're feeling divinity around you. A good that's why we have agarbatti. If it smells good, if the place is clean, your heart is then going to feel a lot nicer and softer. And over time of doing this, your heart begins to relax and say, it's okay, I don't need my shields up all the time. And then that current can flow, which is always flowing, but we've dammed it up with all this me and mine talk.
So one final question to bring our conversation to a close this evening. And again, we thank you so much, Gaurav, for joining us and for sharing these insights and thoughts. So a final question on a more practical tip is, how would you advise or guide folks who want to help to share karma yoga wisdom with others, and particularly for parents who may want to help young children kind of grasp this concept and establish kind of patterns and practices of karma yoga even from a young age?
Um, Creating a culture of selfless service is very important for our society because, especially with our kids, um, especially Hindu families, we don't have a way of teaching our kids how to serve in the community. And learning to serve in the community and building an appreciation for the joy and satisfaction that comes from serving others selflessly, not because they're going to give us kudos or thank us, but simply just serving because the satisfaction you get out of it is very good. And it's because you're not getting any appreciation back, it's selfless. Teaching ourselves and our children how selfless service is a deep source of satisfaction is a very important thing for all of us. So, in terms of practical tips, go to community service. A Hindu Community Institute. We're teaching. It's a school for karma yoga. We're teaching people, grown-ups like us, how to rekindle in our innate ability to serve and serve the community, because then everyone feels that connection. Everyone feels that connection, and we make a better society as a result of it. Plus, we feel good about it.
Beautiful. And what a great final reflection and practical tip to end on. So again, on behalf of the Hindu Life program of Princeton University, we're so grateful to you. Thank you, Gaurav, for joining us. And thank you to everyone who has joined us for this conversation this evening. Thank you all for your questions. And we apologize if that we weren't able to get to everyone's question or comment, but we want to stay in integrity with our time. So again, on behalf of the Hindu Life program at Princeton University, have a wonderful rest of your evening. Have a great weekend and great week to come. Take good care, everyone. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Thank you.